Hey everyone! In today's episode of the show, I've got Eric Siren back on the show, and we're going to be building on the DNS episode that we did a couple of episodes ago, right? In that episode, we talked about the basics of DNS, and we basically deep dived the entire protocol and the, resolution process and everything. Well, today we're going to be focusing on DNS over HTTPS, secure DNS lookups, why you want it, why DNS over HTTPS all by itself is not enough, and we're also going to include some talk of Encrypted Client Hello in there as well too. And so by the end of this episode, you'll have an idea of what an entire end-to-end encrypted DNS process looks like. That's what we've got lined up today on today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Hey everyone, it's a new week. That means it's time for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. This is your podcast by sysadmins for sysadmins and dedicated to all the tireless tech folks working in the trenches day in and day out to keep the digital world spinning. As always, I'm your host, Andy Serwich, and I've got my good friend, as always, Eric Siren with me today. How's it going, Eric?
Having a good day. How's it going for you, buddy?
That's good. I can't complain. Having a good day here as well, too. We are recording this the day after Memorial Day, so just got off of a long weekend where I guess you could say I had the penultimate sysadmin weekend because I both nerded out on tech stuff in my lab, and I literally touched grass and dirt as well, too. So, win-win. So... Anyway, that's kind of what I had going on over the long weekend. Hopefully you had a good time as well, folks, and you too, Eric. So hopefully you got some time off to do some fun stuff. So anyway, we've got a good episode lined up today. Today we are going to be kind of building on our DNS episode that we had, I want to say 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. Eric, you and I, we deep dive DNS, basically. And during that episode, I kind of covered some of the security stuff that's involved in terms of DNS. Briefly touched on DNS over HTTPS. Well, today we're going to focus specifically on kind of secure DNS lookups and the security and the privacy aspects behind that. So we're going to dive into DNS over HTTPS. We're going to talk about Encrypted Client Hello and why you kind of need both of them for secure web lookups, and DNS over HTTPS is not enough all by itself. So that's kind of what we're going to dive into today. But before we get to that, we have our usual recurring segments, and I guess I will start with my show plug. So if you are new to the show, welcome. Hopefully you enjoy your time here. We talk about all kinds of geeky, nerdy stuff here in the first 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes of each episode. So if you're looking to get right to the main segment, you can always go to somewhere around the 20-minute mark, and generally that's when we start our main topic. But again, we during our intros we do a lot of geeky, nerdy stuff that's timely. We talk about news stuff, nerd stuff we're doing in our own time, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, if you want a list of all the links associated with the show, you can go out to www.sysadminweekly.com. You'll find links to the YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcasts, as well as a link to our companion newsletter at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com. So be sure to subscribe and check that out as well. Other than that, let's get to our our regular segments here, recurring segments, Eric. So the first one being our News React segment. This is the segment of our show where my co-host and I, we each bring up a tech news item that kind of caught our eyes over the last couple of weeks, and we do some quick discussion over it. So Eric, I'm going to let you go first this week. What do you got for a news headline, tech news headline?
I'm assuming that most folks have heard about the push for age verification in operating systems to it's packaged around the concept of not letting children they package it as we're going to protect the kids, which is how a lot of things go, and can't really argue with it. Anyway, to shorten that down a little bit, California had passed something like, you got to start doing this, and
Yep.
they are now working on backing that down by making an exception for Linux. So
Interesting.
curious how that's going to work out. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the UK already has a law in place like this.
They
Does that
do,
sound right to
yes.
you? So
I
yeah,
want to
it'll
say
be interesting to see how this is shaking down. Like as a father, and of course, generally, I like to protect children. I think it's conceptually fine, but we've also seen a lot of nonsense go in the name of protecting children that doesn't actually protect them from anything. So
oh, absolutely. There's a lot of that, but for the children going around, you
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, being security focused in my place in the industry, I've had my eye on this particular bill from California for a while now. And there's just been a big concentrated push, both at the state level here in the US, as well as the federal level in the US and in other countries around the world to have this age verification laws put into place. And uh, California's stance is kind of interesting. For those that don't live in the US, California tends to be a little bit more on the left leaning, liberal side of things. A lot of people were surprised to see that state law go through in California because it's generally not viewed as, like a liberal stance. But I think what they're doing here is the state legislature said, again, this is my opinion. I'm not quoting anyone. This is my opinion, but it looks like the state legislature said, okay, if you want to force through all this age verification stuff, instead of each software provider being responsible for their own age verification and processing everyone's information, we're going to do it once at the operating system level. The OS will store that information in a secure enclave within the operating system, and then applications can make a simple call. Is the user over 18? Yes or no. The operating system says yes or no. Now, that particular law, the only requirement was it asked the user a question at some point during setup and configuration. Are you 18? Yes or no? And you can put whatever you want there. There's no actual ID verification as part of that process. So, and of course, the other problem with that we all know is what about, families with a single shared computer? How do you verify the person that is sitting at the machine? Of course, that's the whole identity puzzle that we've been battling all these years, right? So,
right.
anyway, I think I think from the stance of combating overreaching age verification, it's probably again, my opinion, the uncomfortable middle ground where, like, okay, if you guys are dead set on having age verification, this is probably the solution that makes everyone equally unhappy, right? So if I had my choice, we'd just be doing what we've always been doing all these years, right? But anyway, well, that's a good one. Definitely a good one to keep an eye on, Eric. So I'm glad you brought that one up. My particular news item. Have you heard the news about Microsoft Edge, Eric?
No, no, I have not.
Are you sitting down?
Well, fortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, yes. Okay. So I've been following the saga for a couple of weeks now. So, disclosed on May 4th by a security researcher. I'm not even going to try and say his name because, yeah, it's in the article that I'm linking in the show notes, folks. You can take a look. But on May 4th, a security researcher demonstrated that all credentials stored in the Edge built in password manager were decrypted on launch and kept in memory even when not in use. Meaning, how you have the option to save passwords using the Edge browser, right? You log into a service and it's like, hey, would you like me to remember that password for you next time? That particular password save function. A security researcher built a proof of concept where you could access those passwords decrypted and stored in memory in the clear, in plain text. So
Okay. Yeah, I think I did see that.
yep, exactly. And so this particular researcher went to Microsoft and responsibly disclosed it. And what did they originally say? Working as intended.
Right.
Now,
Yeah. Now that is what I saw. I remember that.
yep.
Yep.
And the researcher went and looked at other Chromium-based browsers, and Edge is the only one that loads these passwords in memory in the clear, even when they're not in use. And so, like I said, he released a proof of concept where you could actually go and view these passwords in the clear with a simple tool. So,
You have to
anyway,
do it as you.
so
'Cause
if you do it as you can only see your passwords. But if you run it as system admin, you can see everyone's passwords on the whole system. If
okay,
there's
that's a
multiple
problem.
users using Chrome, or sorry, using Edge.
So like
So,
on a terminal server, you could.
yes, it would be all kinds of ugly on a terminal server for sure. So now Microsoft has, now that they're getting bad press over this, they're now saying like, okay, future versions of Edge aren't going to do this, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I don't know. This is like a cardinal sin of security, right? One, we don't keep things in memory that don't need to be there. For one. Two, you don't ever store secrets in the clear, no matter where they're at. Like, ah, sorry, pet
There's
peeve of
a
mine.
yeah, there's a I've been playing around with a similar problem with uh trying to think of what project that is. I know I published it. Where you'll be passing in credentials for the SIM communications, the thing that PowerShell remoting sits on top.
Oh, right. Yep. Yep.
So it needs to pass a credential pack down into that. And so I've been back and forth like, how am I going to do that? So within the Win32 API, there is a way to put credentials into memory, but make all access in and out. So it's encrypted when it sits there, and you can decrypt it when you need it, and then discard the memory where the decrypted credentials sat. So it's right. So like basically what I'm getting at is Microsoft already owns this
Yeah. So, like, why
ability,
not
and
use it?
and this is something I was going to talk to you about at some point. Like shoot holes in this. What am I missing with my thought process here? What have I not? So if I'm going to use it to pass it to PowerShell, I decrypt it at that point, fire it over to PowerShell, and then or not delete, but zero out the memory where I had it and let it sit. Because it'll still sit in clear text. It'll be in memory, but not in clear text. So
On the surface, I don't see anything wrong with it.
and it would be at the client side too. So only and the way this is all set up, only your user account. This is the way the API is built. Only the user
Right.
account that owns the memory can decrypt it.
Right.
Nobody else can, not even the system.
Yeah.
And this is an API that Microsoft owns. So
Yeah. So,
well,
like,
Edge of
why not?
course is multi-platform, but maybe
True.
that, but still, I'm sure Linux has got to have something similar.
Right. And
I would
so,
think maybe it
I
doesn't. I don't
mean,
know, but
like, why wouldn't you just leverage what is already in the Chromium browser? Like,
I'm not that I don't have an answer because I don't know how Chromium works. I'm
I
just thinking
mean,
from a
Google doesn't have this issue that we're aware of, right? The researcher said Google doesn't have this issue. I was just, I
what I'm wondering, and the reason I'm thinking it here is that so Windows does have a password store, a credential manager in it, built into it.
right,
So I wondered if like, well, is that where they're being kept? Because that would be convenient for me.
right. But why load them
If
into
I were
memory and just let them sit?
I don't know. I don't
It's
know.
very strange because
It's
then they
like
get
you
caught
kind
up
of
in a
want to
dump
go
and
talk to me about how you got to the place where you decided to do that. And maybe I wouldn't be as uh because right now, of course, my knee-jerk reaction is, "What are you doing?"
yeah.
Right? But when you're dealing with passwords, surely it wasn't just, whatever." Not in
I would
2025,
hope not.
2026. You would
Yeah,
think,
I would hope
no, it
not.
wouldn't be. And if it is, well, somebody either well, that's a learning opportunity. How about we say that?
Yep. So I've got news alerts set up for this one. I'm gonna keep an eye on it because I'm kind of curious what the original intention was. But we'll see. But yeah, I saw that and I'm like, really? Stored in the clear? That's not great. Uh
No. Especially on
anyway,
an operating system. Well, of course, again, going back to it is open source, but sorry, not open source, cross-platform. I don't
cross
know why I keep
platform, yeah.
those are not the same thing in any way, shape, or form, but
Right, yeah.
cross-platform. Um, Maybe I don't know, but on Windows, I mean, Windows has a mechanism kind of
Yeah.
built around the idea that that's going to be a thing you're going to have to do is play with credentials once in a while
Yeah, exactly. So
or
anyway.
secrets. So
So the one other news adjacent item I want to mention, I'm going to keep it quick here before we get to our news hour or our news our nerd hour segment. The other news item I wanted to mention real quick. So again, we are recording this episode on what is the date today? May 26th is the day we're recording this. Well, there happens to be a Ultimate Linux and SysAdmin bundle, book bundle out on Humble Bundle. So humblebundle.com/books. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. It's up for 20 days. And if you're not familiar with Humble Bundle, the way it works is they usually put together a bundle of books and or software or video games, and you pay what you want for that bundle. Usually there's a minimum amount you have to pay, and then you get to choose how much of it goes towards the provider of that bundle and how much goes to charity. That's generally how it works. And Humble Bundle takes their, small cut as well too. So not only do you get some really cool sysadmin related ebooks, but you donate to charity as well too. And so I'm not going to go through every single book in the bundle here, but there's a couple that really stand out. Let's see, Mastering PowerShell Scripting. These are all by Pact Publishing, by the way. So there's a Mastering PowerShell Scripting one, um, uh, Mastering Windows Server 2025, Windows Server 2025 Administration Fundamentals. There's a whole slew of Linux books in here as well, too. The Ultimate Linux Shell Scripting Guide, Linux Administration, Mastering Azure Virtual Desktop. So a lot of great books in here for you folks to check out. I know I'm going to be picking up that one just to have. So anyway, be sure to
I
check that
will
out. I'll put
too.
a link. Yep. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. With that, let's
And
move on
while
to
we're
our nerd.
stamping our name on this, I just want to point out the quality of packed books is very hit and miss. Some of them are amazing and some of them are awful.
Agreed.
So if you get one out of here and you're like, oh my, this is terrible. Sorry,
I'd like to think,
we
Eric,
didn't write any of these.
I'd like to think the packed book that you and I wrote many, many, many years ago now was one of the good ones, but I'm biased.
Well, I am biased on those as well. I have gone to great lengths to point out anytime anybody catches it that there was a phase, and this is the one that we co-authored. I don't remember having the trouble with, but the first one, I got all the way done with it and I sent it to them and said, okay, now we're going to give it to our language reviewer and they're going to do their work on it for not technical stuff, but language based. Okay, great, cool. Two things. First of all, there is a difference between American English and Indian English, and the reviewer was Indian English, and he changed a lot of things to ways that I don't speak. Didn't care for that. But the one that was really egregious is like serious errors. Like there's a paragraph partway through that just stops. Like halfway through the paragraph, it just stops. No punctuation, no nothing. It just
Yeah.
ends. And I caught all this and I sent it back. Like, can you fix all that? And I'm like, oh yeah, I won't go to print like that. No problem. It went to print like that.
Oh no.
So I have been very, very irritated for how long has that book been out? 12 years. I'm still
It's been
mad
a
about it.
while. It's
I'm
been a
still
while.
salty
Yeah.
about that. So yeah. Yeah. So
Well, like you said,
I will own the problems that I put into that book. I have no problem doing that, but it's also like now I got to own this guy's problems too because you know whose name is on the front of it.
yep.
So yeah, that was
That's
just
how that works. Anyway. Well, like you said, some pack books are really good. Others are sometimes a miss. It just depends. So
yeah. So I just don't
anyway,
want my I don't want my name as somebody to well, they told me to get it. Like, well, it's not like I've read all of these. I didn't write any of them, so you know, I know at the end of the year they tend to do a sale where every book is $5 or $6, the digital version.
yeah.
So just at that price, this is an amazing deal. It's
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
$18 get you all 24. So
Yep. Yep. Can't
yeah,
go wrong.
it's a good deal. So even if you find a book that's not great, I don't think it's gonna hurt you. And even the
Yep.
books I read by them that aren't great, I don't think I've ever had one that was like, "Well, this is just straight up junk." I don't think that's ever happened. I think it's just been
No,
some
it hasn't. Some of them are just nice to have for reference purposes. Like the one that stands out to me for this would be Linux kernel programming. Now, I don't do stuff with the kernel very often. Once in a while, I want to flip a switch inside the kernel. Yeah, I could go do a Google search or, like, oh, quick open this ebook and go to the chapter I need, right? So, useful for stuff like that.
Yep. And then, like, I probably won't use his Zabbix book, but oh well, whatever, fine.
Right. Yeah. So,
So
anyway, Well, let's move on to our Nerd Hour segment. This is the segment of the show where my co-host and I talk about the geeky, nerdy things that we're doing in either our professional or our personal time. Eric, I will send it over to you first. What have you been doing for Nerd Hour lately?
Well, that's why I'm really glad you suggested this topic for this week because I have talked about it before, but I am looking into moving my home lab or my home network, I should say, off of. 'Cause I'm still using the ISP's DNS and the router and
Oh, yep.
everything else. So I have been, I need to do something about that. So this week's topic is heading in my direction. I'm still researching. I want to get, some pie holes and DNS, override the DNS and everything else going on here. So that's
Should
home
have
lab
some.
type stuff.
That's right. That's right. So hopefully, so the whole reason for this particular topic is I've been down this rabbit hole deep in the last week or two here. So hopefully we can, through our discussion today, give you some ideas and things you want to try out for your own implementation too, Eric. So looking forward to our chat today. Um, for my Nerd Hour segment, um, it's partially what led me down the DNS rabbit hole is, and I'm not going to go into all sorts of detail now because Eric and I are going to do an episode specifically on buying home lab hardware in the age of AI, right? So I was the keyword here, looking at a hardware refresh for my home lab because I had a 10-year-old server in my lab. Surprise! It started failing over this last weekend, not Memorial Day weekend, but the weekend before. I started getting some disk errors and services were failing, and because bad blocks on the disk. It was a whole thing. Anyway, so I started going down the rabbit hole of rebuilding my lab, and well, as part of I made a decision, and I'll explain in the future episode why I made this decision to re-architect my entire lab for longevity, right? So minimal writes, minimize my lab footprint for various reasons I'll explain in a future episode. But part of this was in rebuilding the DNS stack in my lab, and that's what spawned today's topic was that whole thing. But the other part of this I guess lab refresh I did was I had one remaining Windows box in my sphere, and it was my laptop that primarily used for gaming purposes, but I did some other stuff on it, and it too is now running Debian Linux. So no longer have a Windows operating system that I touch on the regular, which I guess is kind of the end of an era. I trying to think of how long I've had forever, I guess. I've always had a Windows box around, but now I don't know. Just found myself not using it a whole lot, and there's some open source tools that I would rather run on it. And anyway, so that's what all my Nerd Hour stuff has been lately is making changes to my lab, this laptop, and all that type of stuff. So anyway, more details on the lab refresh in a coming episode. So with that, what do you think, Eric? Should we dive into our main topic?
Yes, teach me about DNS, sir.
Well, that actually is a good segue because if you feel a little rusty on DNS, you want a refresher. Eric and I want to say it was 3 episodes ago, we did a whole episode all about DNS. From the ground up. And that, I don't know, it turned into an hour, a little over an hour, but we covered a lot of ground regarding DNS. So if you want a refresher on DNS before we dive into this, go ahead and check out that episode. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, folks. But again, our main topic today is we are talking about this idea of DNS privacy. And it often surprises folks that when you go out and you actually look at the spec for DNS, that DNS queries, DNS lookups are all done by default. They are all done in the clear. So, if I'm your ISP and I'm watching all the traffic coming across your wire, I can see every single one of your lookups. What website you requested, what IP it ended up going to. I can see all that information because all those DNS lookups are in the clear. And that's where DNS over HTTPS comes into play. And DNS over HTTPS is exactly what it sounds like, right? We're going to take DNS lookups and we are going to pipe them over over HTTPS, and we're going to gain the benefits of TLS and encryption, right? That's the goal there. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because there's a lot of folks I've talked to that they think DNS over HTTPS is the magic silver bullet. If I do this, all of my DNS queries will be, private. Nobody will be able to see them, et cetera, et cetera. That's not entirely true. So when we talk about when we talk about this from an attack surface perspective, putting DNS over HTTPS in play is absolutely a stellar move. It does a fantastic job of hardening your security posture, so people can't snoop on DNS queries, right? And the example I've used so far has been, the evil spying ISP, or if I want to get even more tinfoil hattish, the government, they're spying, right? They're spying on, right? Those aren't the only cases, right? Think about think about, the business where you work. Think about all the DNS queries that are happening on a given day, right? If I was an attacker sitting inside your network, watching DNS queries, I could glean a lot of information about the types of services that your company uses, the websites that people frequently go. I could use that to help tailor my attack. Now, again, that's assuming I'm inside the network. Even if I'm outside the network and I position myself properly to kind of intercept and look at your DNS lookups, if they're in plain text, I can glean a lot of information there too, right? And so there is a very real business security case for using DNS over HTTPS as well too. Not just the tinfoil hat reasons that I jokingly use as an example. And so, like I mentioned, DNS over HTTPS will get you 90% of the way there for nice private lookups, and it does harden your security posture. There's one problem remaining once you put DNS over HTTPS in play, and that is the server SNI. And real quick here, SNI, I always forget what the acronym stands for. Where are we at here? Server name indication. That's what SNI stands for. I know what it stands for. I always forget what the acronym stands for. So when I make an HTTPS connection with a server, I do, as part of the TLS part of that connection, I send an SNI request to that server. And it's like I said, it's a TLS extension, and it tells that destination server what host name I'm looking to connect to. And why do we have this? Well, because in our mega hosted world of the internet here, right, it's very feasible that AndyOnTech.com and ProjectRunspace.com could both be on the same web host, hence resolving to the same IP address. So when I send an HTTP request to one of those websites, that web server is going to be like, cool, you want to connect. What host name are you looking for, right? The SNI is what contains that host name information. Now, here's where it gets tricky from a privacy and a security perspective. Yeah, my DNS query itself is encrypted, but that SNI message is still sent in plain text. So there's still a danger of information leakage because that SNI request has at least the host name that I'm looking to connect to. So then you ultimately end up in the place where I was, a long time ago when I started looking into this initially. Basically where it comes down to is it looks like if you don't solve the SNI problem, that DNS over HTTPS is useless. That's not the case. So from a attack perspective, let me give you an idea of what you're really protecting against with the two. So let's focus on DNS over HTTPS for a second. When you put that in place, what you're really guarding against is large, large collection type of efforts, right? If I am grabbing all of the packets that come out of your pipe and I'm inspecting all of them en masse, right? That's what DNS over HTTPS really guards against, because in order to actually view the SNI of a specific request, I have to do deep packet inspection. I actually have to grab packets that I know has the SNI request in it, and I have to dig it apart and find that SNI. It's buried deep. Now, how do we solve the SNI piece? Well, there is another protocol that we use in our web browsers called ECH, Encrypted Client Hello. Now, the SNI is sent as part of that initial hello message to the web server. Encrypted Client Hello encrypts that transaction between the destination web server and my web browser, right? Thus encrypting the SNI and completing the full chain of privacy across the entire lookup. And so in order to have that full privacy, like I said, you have to not only have DNS over HTTPS, but you have to have a browser that supports ECH as well too. And to my knowledge, Chromium-based browsers support it, Firefox supports it, and to my to my displeasure, Safari does not yet support encrypted client hello. And I laugh at myself at this because if you look at andyontech.com, I think it was towards the end of last year or the early beginning of this year, I stood up on my soapbox and I wrote a whole article about how there's no good web browsers left because of reasons. You can go read the article if you want. And I said, well, it looks like I'm going to standardize on. I even did a solo podcast episode on this particular topic too. And I said I was going to standardize on Safari as my main and Brave as my alternative in situations where I need Chromium for some reason. Well, I switched back to Firefox and I disabled all of the browser built-in AI stuff that I could because Safari does not support encrypted client hello. So anyway, that's a crash course on DNS over HTTPS alongside encrypted client hello. And I'm very aware that I have been rambling myself this whole time. I want to make sure you have a chance to get a word in edgewise here, Eric. Anything you want to add?
Oh, just a little color commentary. I wasn't even aware that Safari supported HTML5 yet, so
Oh, come on. Ouch. They
what?
do tend to be a little slow from what I've seen. I will say I'm very impressed with all other facets of Safari, um, but I was shocked. I mean, in terms of companies, Apple, they do fairly well in terms of security and privacy across their ecosystem. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but ECH and Safari's just that seems like a glaring omission when we talk about privacy, right? And I wonder if the reason they haven't is because there's a new feature in iCloud. What is it? iCloud Private Relay. It's basically a VPN service. I wonder if their answer is like, well, if you're worried about, SNI leaking, just use, our relay service, right? So I wonder if
That's an
that's what their line of
awful
thinking is.
answer. That is easily the worst answer to that. The heck
Yep.
does a user know about EH? And why? Because a user shouldn't have to know about that to get the benefits of
No,
it.
the user
So
should
if they're
not.
like, "Oh, if you actually want it to be secure, use it." No, then you've instantly lost me. I mean, I'm not a friend of Apple, never have been, and I always thought, well, is their security rating just because there's no such thing as an Apple operating system? They're just reskinning BSD, or do they actually do their own security stuff? I don't know, but I don't tend to trust any answer that I'm given. So whatever.
Man,
Oh,
you should come over to the security side of the world then, Eric. I mean, that's the baseline stance you need to have is I don't trust any answer I've been given.
I've I have different reasons for distrusting everybody, but yes, I still distrust everybody.
Yeah. Speaking in generalities, Apple is better than average when it comes to security across their ecosystem.
How do we set an
Um,
average? I mean, how big? When you look at a lot of these ponds, how big are they really?
very
So,
true. I
like
mean,
browsers, what do you got? 5?
I mean, when you
Chromium,
get right down to
Chromium,
it,
and then everybody who's based on
3.
Chromium, that's one pool.
You
So
really have
Chromium,
3. You have Chromium, Firefox,
Opera,
and
Firefox, Safari, which is WebKit. So anything based on WebKit,
yep.
that's all one
Opera
stack.
is
2 or 4.
Chromium-based now, if I
Oh,
remember
it is. All
correctly,
right, so
isn't
we're
it?
back down to 3.
I could be
Uh,
wrong. I haven't looked, but I seem to remember hearing that Opera was Chromium-based now.
yeah, I don't even know. So kind of like tires, like, oh, I'm this tire versus that tire. Yeah, there's only 2 manufactured tires on the planet Earth. So, you just
Yeah, and part of my big browser rant, both in the blog post and that podcast episode I did, was I I hate the Google monolith that is Chromium, right? It gives them
absolutely.
way too much power across
I was
over the web.
I was so sad when Microsoft gave in to the Chromium thing because they'd gotten all that fire and brimstone about them. We're going to do Edge, and Edge is going to be this, it's going to be that, and what they give that 2 years even, and then we'll just do Chromium. Like,
You hope so kind of what led me down this rabbit hole, right? Again, like I said, I ended up rebuilding my entire DNS stack for my house and the lab. And historically, my stack consisted of 2 components. I ran Pi-holes. I had 2 of them, 2 Pi-hole devices for DNS resolution, as well as, well, I guess 3 reasons. DNS resolution, filtration. So if you're not familiar with Pi-hole, it is a ad filtration tool. So get ad filtration as well. And I also used it when paired with Cloudflared, which is a service that allows you to use DNS over HTTPS via Cloudflare. So you pair Cloudflared with Pi-hole, and that enabled you to have a full end-to-end encrypted DNS stack. Now, like I said, I started going down the rabbit hole of, excuse me, of rebuilding my whole DNS stack. So I started looking at like, okay, what's new in the Pi-hole Cloudflared stack, and I came across an article on Cloudflare's website. I got to pull it up here. And basically, the way that this particular chain worked is I have my client device inside my network here at the house. It queries Pi-hole for a DNS lookup. Pi-hole then says, okay, cool. Let me go get that lookup for you. It then sends that lookup request to Cloudflared, which also runs on the Pi-hole, which then does a DNS over HTTPS lookup to Cloudflare's 1.1.1.1, and then returns it, right? That's the Cloudflared piece is what did the DNS over HTTPS. And that was done in Cloudflared via a command known as proxy-dns. That's the whole feature that enabled this pairing with Pi-hole. Well, come to find out, back in November of 2025, Cloudflare made a big announcement here. And there's a lot of eyebrow-raising kind of items to me in this particular article. It's very short, but I'll put it in the show notes. Basically, they are deprecating proxy-dns. That's the command that enabled this entire Pi-hole type of configuration. And there is no direct migration path to continue using Pi-hole for DNS over HTTPS. There's no migration path. Even the folks that make Pi-hole even acknowledge that as well themselves too. So it seems like the community is very upset about this. But you go and look at this Cloudflare article, and they do have a migration path listed. There we go. And this is where the eyebrow raising starts. So, and I'm quoting the article here. We strongly advise users of this undocumented feature, and they claim that they never documented this proxy DNS service, and therefore that's why they're getting rid of it, because it may not be secure. I don't know, but I'm quoting their article here. We strongly advise users of this undocumented feature to migrate to one of the following officially supported solutions before February 2nd, 2026, to continue benefiting from secure DNS over HTTPS. Now, they have two options here. They have an option for end user devices, and then they have an options for servers, routers, and IoT devices. So, again, quoting the article here, I'll go over the end user device migration path first. The preferred method for enabling DNS over HTTPS on user devices is the Cloudflare Warp client. The Warp client automatically secures and proxies all DNS traffic from your device, integrating it with your organization's zero trust policies and posture checks. So, we are installing a Cloudflare client that is tied to a Cloudflare service on the endpoint. Okay. They do have some zero trust services that they offer to their customers. I guess I could see it. That one didn't raise my eyebrows too much, right? But I don't like the idea of like, okay, in order to have secure DNS lookups, I need to install a whole client for that. It's kind of icky, right? This is
Hard
where,
pass.
what's that?
Hard pass.
Yep. Oh, it gets worse. It gets worse. Are you ready for this one? So the article continues. I'm quoting again, for scenarios where installing a client on every device is not possible, such as servers, routers, or IoT devices, we recommend using the Warp connector. Instead of running Cloudflare proxy-dns on a machine, you can install the Warp connector on a single Linux host within your private network. All right. Are you paying attention, Eric? Listen to
I'm
this
listening.
part.
I'm already.
This sentence is the kicker right here. I continue. This connector will act as a gateway, securely routing all DNS and network traffic from your entire subnet to Cloudflare for filtering and logging. Let me say that
What?
again. Securely routing all DNS and network traffic from your entire subnet to Cloudflare for filtering and logging. There's a lot of bad
Uh-huh.
words in that sentence.
Which also means that the installable one is doing the same thing.
Correct. All DNS and network traffic.
Nope.
Entire subnet.
Nope.
Filtering and logging.
Nope.
So basically I'm sending all of my network traffic, all of it, to Cloudflare, right?
Nope.
Now,
Nope.
yeah, I could maybe get fancy with internal filtering, and so instantly after I read this, I'm like, nope, I'm out. I'm not using Cloudflare for DNS, period,
Nope.
anymore.
Not
Full
at all.
stop.
Not even as a forwarder. Nope.
And
Done.
it's painful. It's painful for me because I really like a lot of Cloudflare's services. There's a lot of services that I use of Cloudflare's. And so I was really upset to see this. So I started going and looking at other solutions, other ways forward. Now, thankfully, I have a Ubiquiti UDM Pro, right? It's a firewall /switch right. It's got Unify on it, and you can do a lot of things with it. Come to find out, to my benefit, they had quietly added secure encrypted DNS as a feature inside of UDM Pro over the last, I don't know, year or so, and I just haven't seen it. So I was able to change my DNS source from my lab and my home network to my UDM Pro. And then I started digging around for reputable and trustworthy DNS providers. And I chose Quad9 as my provider, my forwarding provider from now on. And why Quad9, do you say? Do you ask? Well, Quad9 is a Swiss nonprofit organization with a strong no logging, no commercial data interests, no Anycast redundancy built in, or has Anycast redundancy built in, and it also has threat intel pulled from 20 plus partners. So the reason I chose Quad9, nonprofit, it's a Swiss company, so it has to adhere to all of the teeth that is contained inside of GDPR, right? So I get the benefits of GDPR, which don't ask me what the acronym stands for those that aren't aware. General data.
Yeah,
Look
we'll
it up.
delete your
GDPR.
stuff. We'll delete your
Right.
stuff.
It's European Union personal data control and regulation is what it is. But good for privacy, having to adhere to GDPR. But Cloudflare yes, they have a good policy, good privacy policy on paper, but a profit motive still exists. Clearly, based on what they have talked about. And I'm sure that the warp connector is probably free or there's a free tier or whatever. But the fact that they want to be part of every single network lookup on either my standalone machine or my entire network, red flag, right? Red flag.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's where I ultimately ended up, right? Is
This
using
is
my UDM
where we need
Pro.
to remind everybody, when you're talking about a for-profit company, when the service is free, that means you are the product.
Correct. Yep. Correct.
Maybe
And so,
sometimes there are gateways into paid tiers, I should say that's not, but you need to assume when the product is free to consume that you are the product.
yep. Yep. So that's ultimately why I standardize on my UDM Pro. I'm again trying to reduce my lab footprint, architecting for longevity, um, using my UDM Pro as the DNS source for my network now, and I'm using it to send encrypted DNS lookups to Quad 9. And then I'm using a browser that has ECH built in. So I have full end to end, encrypted DNS lookups from front to start now. And so, I guess anything you want to add to any of that I've mentioned. Again, I got up on my soapbox, and like I said, I've been really deep in this private and secure DNS. I've been very passionate about it lately. So I want to make sure you get a chance to add a word here, Eric.
I don't have a lot to add. I mean, it's the big thing is something that I've said, and I'm not the only one. Just because I have nothing to hide doesn't mean I want you in my business.
Right,
And
exactly.
the other part, and it became more apparent to me when they started talking about post quantum cryptography that, and I know that you and I have talked. So there's a difference between secure and private. So if I'm sending encrypted data on a public network and somebody captures it, even if they can't read it, it's no longer secure. It's simply private because it's basically a matter of time until they open it.
Yep,
Or they might give up, but you don't know that. As long as they have it, they have the ability to crack at it. So with quantum quick cryptography coming in, data that's been previously collected could now be broken. So with your DNS queries, if they're sitting on it and collecting it, even if they're not
yeah,
doing anything with it today. Let's say, your Cloudflare gets bought out by one of these vulture capitalist groups who just want to sell your data. Then, well, now they have that. So if they've had it in the
yep,
past, even if they're not doing anything with it now, they might do something with it in the future. And
yeah,
going back to the quantum cryptography thing is today, maybe you don't see any risk in having your DNS collected, but in 10 years, you might change your mind. So, especially like people in the United States, for so long, we've been protected that I can go out and read the Communist Manifesto and it's no big deal, right? 10 years from now, the world might change and go, well, why did you do that? And you might, well, in my case, I just wanted to know, like, was Karl Marx not very smart? Or is there something to this that I don't understand? What's going on? I don't want to be a communist. I have no interest in being, everything I understand about communism is a terrible plan. But I read it anyway, and I'll be honest with you, it's very dense and I don't know how much I actually got out of it, but I did read the thing. So 10 years from now, are we still going to have the same protections on freedom of speech where I can do that and not be considered, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
if anything I'm doing today well, what do I really care if somebody sees that DNS? Well, maybe in 10 years I will care. And if Cloudflare is accumulating the information on my DNS queries
yep, yep. Like I said, on paper, they have a good policy, a good privacy policy on paper.
on paper,
Now, there will always be a conflict with for-profit interests when it comes to that type of stuff. They might not say it today, right? If you asked me 5 years ago whether Firefox would start implementing bloatware into their browser, I would have laughed at you, right? Well, they're now
they
integrated.
are.
The CEO of Mozilla wants to make Firefox a AI browser, right? Hence why I moved to Safari. Well, for now, for the time being, like I said, I've moved back to Firefox and turned off all the AI stuff because, from a security industry perspective, again, which is where I sit in the industry, we don't understand the threat model for AI in the browser well enough yet. We just don't,
Yep.
right? And so when I hear people like, yeah, I installed an AI browser and it's my daily driver, and I'm like, maybe
Nope.
don't. Maybe
Nope.
don't.
Nope.
It's fine to tinker with it, but I would not put anything sensitive through that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
But
and you come back to the same thing we were just talking about. How do you know what's sensitive in the future when the stuff is
yep,
just hoarding your
very
data?
true. Very true. Yeah, and the whole quantum cryptography thing. I mean, I joke, but there's a layer of truth to it. I joke that quantum has seemed right around the corner and simultaneously 30 years away at the same time, right?
Forever, forever,
And the
yeah.
thing is, it's going to feel that way until all of a sudden it's not anymore.
It
All of a
is. It's
sudden,
100% true.
all of a sudden, quantum's going to be a big thing. And the industry is largely stepping up to solve that issue. We do have quantum resistant encryption now. We have those
Mhm.
standards defined, and the big players are starting to roll it out. That doesn't solve what you said, Eric. All the DNS lookups that have already been captured and are sitting on a server somewhere, right? That are encrypted with 256-bit AES or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Not to mention all the plain text lookups that have been sitting out there forever, right?
Yeah, and so not even from a cryptographic standpoint, but your AI again is now we can plumb some of that data, and it's only gonna get better in the future, and they may start drawing inferences out of there that, you know, like the fact that I went to Netflix.com at this certain date and a certain time is irrelevant, but when you dump it into a big pile and AI, which one thing it is amazing at is pattern matching at scale.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, what do they suddenly know that they didn't know from this same stack of data?
Yeah. Yep. So anyway. So again, yeah, the whole what do you have to hide question, right? Well, I don't, but when I go use the bathroom, I close the door,
Yeah,
like
and
I,
there's
I don't
also
know
the
if it
whole
was you
thing
that
of,
made
like,
that joke
even
once or
no, I think you that's a new one for me, but same thing, and
I
there's
heard that
also
somewhere.
what I'm thinking about is, like, there are things I do when I know that I'm alone or think that I'm alone that then suddenly you find out somebody's watching you and and then you're like, "Well, I didn't do anything wrong, I don't know," but it just I don't like it, and I don't think anybody
Yeah.
likes it. I think we all have that same reaction,
And I
you know,
guess
that
from a moral perspective, I'm of the stance that everyone has a right to privacy. That's
yes,
just
yes,
that's
and
my
we should
moral
know
stance.
that, like, especially in the United States, the laws are far behind that. There's, the closest we get is no unlawful search and seizure, but other than that, we don't have a lot of laws around
Right.
privacy. Um, GDPR in Europe is a good one,
Yep.
pro-privacy, but United States, especially like HIPAA is your biggest one that, says your, health information can be private up until the point where you decide to share it somewhere,
Right.
and then, well, now it's yeah, so privacy laws are terrible in general. Don't don't assume that you have anybody is out there to protect your right to privacy. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. It's so that privacy question, that's why I bring up another reason why I bring up this particular topic on today's episode, because something you at least want to be thinking about again from a pure cybersecurity perspective. Don't give would-be attackers more information by letting them just be able to see your DNS lookups, right? Because like, oh boy, they're making a lot of DNS lookups to JP Morgan Chase. That must be who their bank servicer is, right?
Yeah.
You just given me one piece of information I need to access the crown jewels, right?
And
So
somehow
it's
it
a
seems like
simple
they're
example.
figuring that out because I know, like, I get a lot of phishing messages. They are correct. They have chosen, and I don't bank at a major institution. Like,
Yep.
you could throw a Chase thing at somebody and be a fairly good hit. They're probably, they could be Chase, might be Bank of America, whatever. I don't bank through big institutions. So
Yeah.
when I'm getting scam messages for mine, I'm like, "Oh, they know something. They figured something out."
There's a correlation
So
somewhere in publicly
there's
available data.
something somewhere. So imagine that's
Yep.
only gonna get smarter.
Yep. And like you said, AI is really good at picking out patterns. and seemingly unrelated pieces of information, right? So anyway, well, I think that wraps it up for us, Eric. Folks, if you have any questions on any of this, or you want to, add a story or your own 2 cents, again, you can always leave a comment on the YouTube versions of the show, the Spotify versions of the show. And again, I love to uh, address comments on the show when I can. And so, again, if you want to reach us, leave a comment on either of those platforms, or you can reach us right in our inbox at contact@sysadminweekly.com as well, too. With that, Eric, anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I think that really covers it, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge. I learned a lot.
Well, that's good. I appreciate it. Normally I feel like it's you teaching me things, so
Maybe 50-50, but this one I really learned a lot. There's a whole lot here that I need to look into that, so I appreciate you, making an episode on it so I get to learn things.
oh, for sure. Always good having you. So, and those of you watching, thanks for spending some time with us as well too. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode as well too. And again, leave us a comment, send us an email. Other than that, we'll let you get back to your day. Stay safe out there, and we will catch you again for a future episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Have a good one.